Close your eyes for a moment and try to remember the feeling of your favorite old shirt. The way the fabric has thinned until it's soft as a second skin. Now imagine that feeling lasting for 5,000 years. There is a specific, haunting smell to ancient textiles, not of rot, but of dry earth and deep time. It's the scent of a story that has been whispered into the fibers of a loom that hasn't spun in 3 millennia. We often think of the ancient world as a place of cold marble statues and colorless stone ruins. But that's a lie told to us by time. The world of our ancestors was vibrant, tactile, and wrapped in fabrics so complex we still struggle to replicate them today. But there is a mystery hidden in the weave. In a tomb in Tarkhan, Egypt, archaeologists discovered a garment that shouldn't exist. A piece of clothing so sophisticated it challenges everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization. It tells us that we didn't just start by throwing animal skins over our shoulders. We started with a mastery of geometry and fashion that we eventually forgot. What happened to that knowledge? And why did the most powerful people in the world suddenly stop wearing the one garment that defined their status? Before we talk about the why, we have to talk about the how. The Tarkhan dress is over 5,000 years old. It features beautiful, hand-stitched pleats and tailored sleeves. Think about that, tailored sleeves at the very beginning of recorded history. The tactile experience of this dress would have been light as a feather. It was made of linen so fine it was nicknamed woven air. If you ran your fingers over it, it wouldn't feel like the stiff linen of a modern summer suit. It would feel like a cool mist against your skin. The labor involved was staggering, thousands of hours of spinning and weaving. But there's a strange detail. While the dress shows signs of being worn by a wealthy woman, the style vanished. For nearly 1,000 years after, Egyptian fashion shifted to something entirely different, almost as if they were trying to hide the body rather than fit it. This leads us to a bizarre transition in the ancient world, because while the Egyptians were mastering the pleat, another civilization was obsessed with a garment that could literally be used as a weapon. Imagine the sound of a heavy, rhythmic thump-thump as a priest walks across a stone floor. That sound came from the kaunakes, a wraparound skirt made of tiered tufts of wool that looked like stylized fish scales or petals. To wear this was to carry a significant weight. It smelled of lanolin and sheep, a rich, organic scent that signaled wealth in the Fertile Crescent. These weren't just skirts, they were symbols of a cosmic order. If you touched them, they would feel oily and thick, designed to repel the dampness of the Mesopotamian river valleys. The mystery here is the tuft. For years, historians couldn't figure out if these were actual sheepskins or if the Sumerians had invented a way to weave fake fur out of loops of thread. If it was the latter, it means they had developed a high-tech textile industry long before the wheel was common. But as the Sumerians were layering their wool, the Greeks were perfecting a garment that required no sewing at all. Yet it held a secret danger that actually led to a change in Athenian law. The peplos is the quintessential Greek garment, a large rectangular cloth folded and pinned. It sounds simple, almost cozy. The wool was heavy, dyed in deep purples and saffron yellows that would stain your fingers if they got wet in the rain. But the tension lies in the fibulae, the pins used to hold the peplos at the shoulders. These weren't the tiny safety pins we use today. They were long, wicked spikes of bronze or gold. Legend tells us that during a war with Aegina, the women of Athens used their dress pins to kill the lone survivor of a failed military expedition. The government was so terrified of this wardrobe weaponry that they legally mandated a change in fashion, forcing women to switch to the Ionian chiton, which used smaller, harmless fasteners. It's a rare moment where a fashion trend was literally ended by a homicide. Yet, while the Greeks were worrying about pins, the Romans were struggling with a garment so heavy it required 2 servants just to put it on. And it's the one thing everyone gets wrong in the movies. When you think of a toga, you probably think of a bedsheet at a frat party. But the real toga was a beast. It was a massive semicircle of wool, roughly 18 feet long. The smell was distinctive. Romans used fermented urine to bleach their wool white, so a high-ranking senator often smelled faintly of ammonia and sulfur. It was hot, scratchy, and incredibly heavy. You couldn't run in a toga. You could barely even move your left arm, which had to hold the folds in place. The mystery of the toga is why anyone would choose to wear it. It was an anti-utilitarian garment. It was designed to prove you didn't have to work. But there's a hidden detail, the sinus, a deep fold in the chest. Romans didn't have pockets, so the sinus was a dark, secret cavern where they kept everything from scrolls to daggers. The toga eventually died out because it was simply too exhausting to exist in. But as the toga fell, another garment rose in the east, one that used a material so secretive, the penalty for revealing its source was death. In ancient China, the hanfu was the soul of the people. To touch it was to touch something that felt like water. The sound of hanfu is a soft, melodic shuk-shuk, as layers of silk rub against one another. The tension here involves the great silk secret. For centuries, the West had no idea where this fabric came from. Some thought it grew on trees, others thought it was made from the hair of giant desert spiders. The truth was hidden inside the emperor's palace. If you were caught trying to take a silkworm out of China, you were executed. The garment wasn't just clothing, it was a state secret. But the most forgotten part of the hanfu isn't the silk, it's the shenyi, a style that combined the top and bottom into one, representing the union of heaven and earth. It was a philosophy you could wear. But while China was guarding its silk, the nomadic tribes of the steppes were inventing something that would change the human body forever: the first pair of pants. For most of ancient history, civilized men wore tunics or robes. To the Greeks and Romans, trousers were the mark of the barbarian, a shapeless, ridiculous garment worn by those who lived on the fringes of the world. But in the frozen tombs of the Altai Mountains, we found the Pazyryk trousers. They are over 2,500 years old, made of thick, colorful felt that still smells faintly of wood smoke and old leather. When you touch them, you realize they aren't shapeless at all. They are masterfully engineered for a specific high-speed lifestyle. They represent the freedom to ride a horse without chafing, a technological leap that allowed nomadic tribes to conquer distances that would have killed an infantryman. The tension point here is social. Why did the advanced Mediterranean world resist this practical invention for over a millennium? It wasn't about comfort, it was about identity. To wear pants was to admit that the savage on horseback had a better way of living. But once the horse culture forced the world into trousers, we needed a way to protect our feet, leading to a footwear design so strange it made the wearer nearly 2 feet taller and completely unable to walk without help. Imagine standing in a crowded theater in Athens. From the back row, every actor looks like an ant. To solve this, the Greeks invented the kothurnus, a boot with a wooden platform so thick it acted like a personal stage. The sound of these boots was a heavy, rhythmic clack, clack, clack that echoed through the stone amphitheater. They were incredibly unstable. An actor wearing them had to develop a specific slow-motion gait to avoid snapping an ankle. But the mystery isn't in their height, it's in their neutrality. Unlike modern shoes, there was no left or right foot. They were perfectly symmetrical. The discomfort was the point. It forced the actor into a stiff, godlike posture. Yet while the elite were elevating themselves on wooden blocks, the common people were wearing something much closer to the skin. A garment that remained hidden for centuries until a volcanic eruption froze it in time. Because beneath the robes and the platforms, the ancients were wearing a secret layer that looked remarkably like modern athletic gear, but served a much more violent purpose. We often wonder what people wore under those heavy togas. For a long time, historians thought they wore nothing at all. But when the ash was cleared from Pompeii, we found the sublegaculum. It was a loincloth, usually made of linen or leather. If you held one today, it would feel coarse and abrasive against your skin. It wasn't designed for comfort, it was designed for containment. Gladiators wore them to keep their modesty during the brutal movements of the arena, and athletes wore them to signal their status as competitors. The unanswered question here involves the Roman obsession with public nudity versus private modesty. Why did they spend so much time engineering hidden underwear if their art celebrated the naked form? It turns out the sublegaculum was a social safety net, a way to show you were a citizen and not a slave. But while the Romans were hiding their layers, the Minoans on the island of Crete were doing the exact opposite, designing a garment that projected strength in a way that modern fashion would find, well, quite shocking. On the island of Crete, 3,500 years ago, fashion was a game of extremes. Men cinched their waists with metal belts so tight it likely restricted their breathing, creating an wasp waist silhouette. But the focal point was the Minoan codpiece. These were often made of stiffened leather or even metal, decorated with intricate patterns. To the touch, they were cold and rigid. They didn't just cover, they emphasized. In a culture obsessed with the bull leap, a sport where young men literally flipped over charging bulls, this garment was a shield for the most vulnerable part of the body. The mystery is why this hyper-masculine trend vanished so completely after the Minoan collapse. It's as if the world collectively decided to go soft again, moving toward the draped fabrics of the Mycenaeans. But as the West moved toward draping, the East was perfecting a color so rare and so pungent that its production actually changed the geography of the coastline. If you walked through a royal court in the ancient world, you wouldn't just see the wealth, you would smell it. The color was Tyrian purple, and it was the most expensive substance on Earth, worth more than its weight in gold. The scent was polarizing. It was made from the fermented tears of thousands of tiny murex sea snails. It had a distinct, fishy, musky odor that never truly left the fabric. If you wore a purple robe, people could smell your status from across the street. The tactile sensation was unique too. The chemical process of the dye actually made the wool heavier and more lustrous. The tension point is the lost recipe. When Constantinople fell in 1453, the secret of how to make this specific shade of purple vanished from the world for centuries. We forgot how to talk to the snails. But even as this heavy, smelly royalty was being paraded around, the women of Egypt were wearing something that was the total opposite. A garment so light it was almost invisible, leading to a scandal that lasted for dynasties. The Egyptian calasiris was the ultimate less is more garment. Made of that legendary woven air linen, it was often entirely transparent. If you ran your hand over a high-quality calasiris, you might not even feel the threads, only a slight cooling sensation as the linen wicked sweat away from your body. To the modern eye, it looks like lingerie, but to the Egyptians, it was the height of formal wear. The mystery here is the invisible seam. Archaeologists have found examples where the stitching is so fine it requires a microscope to see. Yet the Egyptians had no magnifying lenses. How did they achieve such perfection? Some believe it was a specialized guild of blind weavers who worked by touch alone. Yet for all this elegance and transparency, the most important garment an Egyptian ever owned was the one they never expected to wear while they were alive. When Howard Carter opened the tomb of King Tut, he didn't just find gold, he found a chest containing over 100 linen loincloths. They were folded neatly, as if waiting for a trip. These were the king's everyday items, but they were buried for the afterlife. They smell of the resin and oils used in the mummification process, a sweet, spicy, medicinal scent. They are simple, triangular pieces of cloth, but they represent a profound human fear, the fear of being naked and unprotected in the next world. The tension point: why did a king who had everything need 100 basic loincloths? Because in the ancient mind, your clothes were your identity. Without them, you were a ghost with no name. We think of our clothes today as disposable, something we buy on a whim from a screen and discard when the season changes. But for the ancients, a garment was a second skin. It was a map of their status, a shield against the elements, and a testament to their survival. When we look at the Tarkan dress or the Pazyryk trousers, we aren't just looking at old rags. We're looking at the tactile choices of people who felt the same cold, the same pride, and the same desire to be remembered as we do. They lived in a world of sensory richness, the smell of Tyrian snails, the weight of a 12-pound toga, the sharpness of a bronze pin that we've largely traded for the sterile convenience of polyester. The mystery isn't just how they made these things, it's why we stopped caring about the soul of what we wear. We've gained comfort, but we've lost the story. I want to hear from you. Is there an item of clothing in your life, maybe an old leather jacket that belonged to your grandfather, or a handmade quilt that feels like it holds a piece of the past? Tell me about the texture, the smell, and the memory in the comments below. Let's keep these threads from fraying away.
Subscribe to Short Lens and explore history from a completely different perspective.